I added two of the private methods that I created, which is the getWinner method and check-and-declare gameWinner. The getWinner method basically takes the cards from public number 1 and public number 2 and compares them. It checks which public has the bigger card value and returns the player that won the round. If no one won the round, that means that we have a tie, and therefore we set the tie variable to true. And we also return null because no one won the round. Check and declare game winner basically check to see if someone won the entire game. If the game is not in tie mode, we get the instance of the player that holds the device. We do so by calling the client controller instance and using the method getMe. We check to see if that player is not holding any cards by calling the isEmpty function. If so, we declare that player to be the loser of the game. Otherwise, we go over each player to get the other player's instance. After we found the other player's instance, which is basically the other player that is in the player's array list, that is not me, we check to see if that guy is not holding any cards. And if so, we declare the player that holds the device to be the winner instead of the loser. And we returned answer variable, which is false if no one won the game yet, and true if someone won the entire game. Next is the setLayouts function. The setLayouts function basically defines how the table will look like. In our wargame, we want to create two public areas, one for each player where it can place his card at. We do so by adding each public area instance to a droppables array list that we get from the superclass, which is game. When we create a new public instance, we need to insert three arguments in its constructor. The first one is public handler, which we will create later. The second one is the position of that public instance, and the third one is the layout of that public instance. In our wargame, we want the mid-left and mid-right public areas, and we want to use a heap layout for each public instance. In the setTurns function, we are going to use the platform API to generate a queue that is good for our purposes. We are going to do so by using the utils package, and there we are going to use the turns API and use the clockwise function. The start player will be the player which is at the bottom, basically the bottom player is the player that hosts the game. The toString method is an important method. It has to return the name of the file, which is war. Okay, now we are done with the war class. Good job! What we are going to do next is to create the public handler for the public instances that we want to create. We create a new class which is called public handler, and we implements the public events handler. We add the unimplemented methods. Each method's return type basically tells us if we can do that action or not. For example, right now we return false on onCardAdded method. That means that we cannot add any cards to a public instance that uses this public handler. Same goes to onCardRemoved, onCardRevealed, and onRoundEnd. What we want to do is we want to create a new private variable which tells us how many cards placed on that public instance while we were in time mode, and we initialize it to 0. We don't need to change anything on the onCardRemoved, onCardRevealed, and onRoundEnd methods because a player cannot remove a card from a public instance while a card placed there. The logic does it for him. Area. We are now going to focus on the main method here, which is the onCardAdded. The onCardAdded happens when a player drags a card into a public area. Okay, now let's explain. The first thing we want to do is we want to get the card that is in that public area. So we do it by using public area.pick. The three arguments that the onCardAdded function gets are public area, which is the area where the player dragged his card to, by whom means who did that action, and card is the card that was being dragged to the public area. What we do now is we are going to see if there are any cards on the public area that the player dragged his card to. The first check is to see if the card that was placed on the public area belongs to the player that moved it. The second check is to see if the public area belongs to the same player that moved the card to it. We do so by checking if the card that is already in the public area belongs to the same player that moved the card that the function gets as an argument. Please notice that this function is called after the card that the player was dragged already added to the public area it was dragged to. The third check is to see if we are in time mode. If we are, then we count the number of cards that were placed on this public area while it was tie and hide that card. Otherwise, we check to see if we have already placed 3 cards on this public area while we were in time mode. If so, we return false. That means that move is illegal and we cannot add any more cards to this public area. Otherwise, it means that we have already placed 2 cards upside down and we want to reveal the third card according to the war game rules. What we do next is we get both public areas and increase the cards placed while tie counter, and we perform the following check. If both public areas are holding the same number of cards, we set the tie mode to false and end the round. Here we go if we aren't in tie mode. That means we reset the cards placed while tie counter to 0 and reveal the card that was placed in this public area. We check to see if the round has ended, and if so, we end the round. Otherwise, we just end the player's turn. Again, keep in mind that each line here happens on each device. Therefore, we get the instance of the player that is holding the device and end his turn. If it is his turn will actually end. If it's not, nothing will happen.